Hey, Greg from Colorado. You have an argument for God. You're an atheist, and you have an argument for God. Is that right?
Or worst argument ever made about God. That's what I'm seeing here.
We've certainly heard lots of bad arguments. Greg?
Yes, I do. I did want to get to the worst argument ever made, and that's the argument that God causes consciousness, which I think is an atrocious argument that no one should ever use. But first, I had a question about debates, and I've seen Matt. I haven't seen either of you hosts enter in debates, but I always hear they debate, and the question is, does God exist? And I always hear that this is an important question, and to me, it is at best an ill-posed question, and it is, to me, completely devoid of meaning. So, why is it that you think it's an important question to ask?
Well, if you pose it a little bit better and say, is there such a thing as a God? Maybe that was a little bit better posed question. It still leaves open what do you define to be a God?
Right.
What qualifies, what doesn't qualify, these sorts of things. But I do consider it an important question in the sense that if there's a God that might be running the show, it's a different universe than if there is no God, because there is this idea of a very powerful agency, and you might want to pay attention to it for various reasons. So I do consider the question important, and I do agree that these sorts of questions are often ill-posed. I remember back to a philosophy book. I took philosophy in college years ago, and they had an essay on the existence of God, and they didn't define God, and they just kind of brushed away the multi-theism question altogether, and started talking about the Christian God without even sort of justifying that whole thing, and I think that's kind of what's going on with that question that you posed is if you start talking about God with a capital G, you're really talking about a particular God with a particular set of features and things that needs a lot of justification.
Rather than starting from the wider span of, does a deity exist, and then trying to narrow down, like, is there just one? Is there multiple? And then focusing it on.
Yeah, it's almost like you're making separate leaps of faith between these questions, right? Is there a God? How many gods? What's the nature of the God? Is it a personal God? These sorts of things.
How are you determining, these attributes? How are you actually arriving to it? But I had a similar conversation with somebody on a campus down in San Antonio. It was along the same lines, where it was kind of brushed away like the multi-theistic type of thing, because it didn't make sense or something along those lines. And it's just like, well, how do we get to that? How do we get to that point?
There's a lot of stuff broken in the world. If you have an all-powerful God that's supposedly can make everything work perfectly, then why is there anything broken?
We just don't understand the mind.
Right.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting, but I was coming more from the fact that if you have a sentence say like God exists. Now, to me, the reason why this is a meaningless statement, or if you go back to the question, say, does God exist? Why that's a meaningless statement, mostly because existence is ambiguous. What is meant by ambiguous? Now, to me, and I'll tell you what I mean, because for me, existence, I always learned that existence meant that you had mass and you occupied space. So, included everything that has mass and occupied space that includes just about everything, tables, chairs, pencils, computers, cell phones, all of those things have mass because they're made out of quarks
Matter.
and
Yep.
electrons.
We're with you.
And all of those things have mass and they take up space. And you can say, well, does sound exist by this definition? And well, it definitely sound takes up space. And since Einstein said that matter and energy are the same, then yes, it has mass. So sound exists. Same with color. See, it's stuff. But where you might need to extend the definition is say, like if I drop my cell phone or I'm driving in my car and a rock hits the windshield cracks. And cracks exist, but it's tough to make the case that they have mass
there's some challenging philosophical questions, and then you have a lot of theists that say, well, God is outside space and time, and it's kind of a segue off to special pleading, right? And so,
right.
What is that even compatible with any sort of notion of existence? So yeah, there's a lot of problems here.
Yeah, and so the overall point then is you can say, well, like cracks or consciousness or something, those exist because you can say if you can measure it, then it exists. Mm-hmm. And you can measure just about anything, except for the only thing that might fall outside and you extend and say it exists would be stuff like ideas, which you can claim that consciousness is an idea. I mean, you're describing, say, a state of mind, although it's difficult, but you could work out systems to measure consciousness, but ideas, say like numbers 1, 2, 3, or like money or anything else, you can, or nation states or
shared abstractions.
Any
right?
of those, you can say those exist because those are ideas, and I can communicate them. And the point that I'm trying to make is, like, if you say it's a spiritual requires a different frame of existence, I don't think so, because anything that you claim that exists spiritually, you can also claim. I don't see any difference between a spiritual existence and an idea existence. So if you claim something is spiritual, I don't see how you can claim that that's somehow different existence.
Well, you're forcing us to argue the theistic point, and I don't think I know enough to argue that. Well, Greg, thank you very much for your call.
But the thing is, if you're talking about spiritual being good or bad, then you're differentiating between good and bad ideas. But sorry. Bye.
All right. Well, thank you, man.